check 1 2 3, MAGA check 1 2 3, and let's check that. As a matter of fact, I didn't even check the last couple streams, so I'm not going to apologize if they've been shitty. I'm just gonna say, y'all that are new to this, this is a crusade. We are in fact Spartans here on Jim Bob's Arcade, and in this war, we are relentless and don't really have time to spruce up the quality for the content for all you kneeling cocksucking faggots out there that want to complain. So, let's see how this shit sounds. Of course, it's not even showing that I'm live, so that's never good, right? If it doesn't show that you're live. And that doesn't surprise me either, because I have gotten into a lot of trouble here on YouTube with the powers that be. Probably the Biden administration personally. The things that I have said on here. I was talking with the Desert Wanderer. I know he definitely didn't want me to drop a name. And he's like, oh yeah, you're probably on a domestic terrorist watch list. And I was like laughing, because he don't want to consider himself liberal, but years ago I would have said he was liberal. I guess now he's more moderate. And that's something that a lot of like pro-Obama people used to say that I did not agree with, that now I do agree with. There's this one guy, Frank Sino, I'll drop a name because I don't like that cocksucker. He's a kneeling faggot. He told me once, just to kind of, because we talk politics and religion at work, just to kind of like jab at me. Said something about Obama, and he's like, the last moderate. And I'm like, moderate? Get the fuck out of here. He ain't no moderate president. And I take that back. I think that in comparison to what we're going to see, you know, when we talk about, oh, I didn't want to do, I wanted to, it doesn't matter. Compared to what we're going to see with the Biden bucks and everything, I mean, it's going to be really bad. You know, one of the funny things that always gets to me, it's like, well, how are y'all motherfuckers going to enjoy buying your drugs or fucking hookers with, you know, trackable dollars that your mom and wife's going to find out about? You know, they're not really thinking this shit all the way through right now, which is typical. You know, that's usually how it goes, right? So let's go ahead and kick this thing off. I don't think I'm in zombies. There we go. I'm in multiplayer. Alright, y'all. Please enjoy Jim Bob's Arcade.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, good afternoon and welcome to Crosstalk here at VCY America. If you've been on a roller coaster, you likely have been bumped around with steep inclines and declines, fast curves, sometimes even being tossed upside down. Well, I'm not a roller coaster enthusiast by any sense of the word. Some years ago, as my children were in teenage years, I let them each pick out a ride for me that they wanted me to go on. Two of them chose various roller coasters, and I remember entering the ride, getting secured in my seat, and was going to need to brace myself as this was going to be a wild ride. Well, in a very parallel way, here in 2022, we are very much on such a ride with all that's unfolding, not only on the national scene, but also on the international scene. And that same thought hits you, that we've got to brace ourselves. Our guest today has written such an article on this very topic, and he's going to unfold it through our broadcast today. We welcome back to Crosstalk Gary Kah, the founder and director of Hope for the World. Gary is editor of the Hope for the World Update, also a former Europe and Middle East trade specialist for the Indiana state government. He is the author of books En Route to Global Occupation and also The New World Religion. Gary, thank you for joining us on the broadcast.
Hi, Jim. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Gary, you received a message from a Christian friend in early June 2022 in which he said, send out the friends, it will be a difficult summer in the U.S. You received this from a person in the know. What can you tell us about this person and what was he referring to?
Well, he's been in the military in face to face. He's very concerned about different things going on, as are other people. But having to be careful, who they share what with. We're getting a lot of this actually right now, Jim. People from all over the place, knowing that I do regular programs like yours, and they're just trying to get the information out. But because of their jobs, they're in a situation where they can't do much or say much, and so almost being overwhelmed.
Let's
right
go.
Now. So much is going
Let's
on
fucking
at the same
go.
time. And so this particular friend, I've known him for quite some time. And I don't want to give out too much as far as where, the area they live in and that type of thing. But he has consistently been right on target and is a very sound person. He's a believer. He's a Christian believer. And believes that our country overall has been headed down the wrong path, although we are, obviously thrilled about the Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision here recently. But because of everything going on, overall, we both feel that the globalists are going to use even that decision to try to cause more calamity and chaos and division, and a lot of the extreme riots that have begun in different parts of the country is probably just the beginning. It's going to get worse, and some of these groups are being funded by the same old sources, that a couple summers ago were funding the upheaval then. So I think that's what I know that's what he had in mind when he sent the message to me that he did, and we're beginning to see that play out now.
Do you believe, Gary, that there are those who are deliberately trying to take down our nation?
I do. I do believe that what we are witnessing at least with some people within the Biden administration, we know that Joe Biden isn't all there. I'm not trying to be rude in the least. I actually feel sorry for the man. He's being given script cards on everything he does and every move he makes. So he has handlers, he has people around him telling him what to do. And I believe many of those advisors are of a radical far left globalist worldview. And in order to bring all of this about, this new world order, this great reset that they're committed to, the U.S. as we know it has to be dismantled. And so everything we're seeing is part of that agenda. But really they're kind of between a rock and a hard spot themselves, because if the faster they move to try to take everything down, the worse things get, and the more American people wake up. And if things drag on to the election, then it could backfire, because others could be voted in that try to undo this agenda. So that, in a sense, has them speeding up even more to try to get as much as possible, if not everything, done before the election, for fear that it could be overturned if we make the election. So there's this world battle going on right now, and they're trying to use every decision made to inflame the left and try to cause chaos. Really, that's the bottom line, is chaos in every area of our lives, to get people to the point where they throw up their hands and say, this is hopeless, and then they'll step on the scene with their great reset plan and say, hey, we've got the answer. Here it is, global government with a cashless, digital, global economic system, and everything's going to be global. That's the solution they want.
Gary Kopp with us here today on Crosstalk. Gary, you indicate that before the American people are willing to embrace this socialist world order, this great reset, so to speak, that this nation must be brought to their knees. Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, as I was just saying, to take it a step further, as long as people can function relatively comfortably, I believe a majority of Americans would not be keen on stepping into a new world order that limits a lot of their freedoms. But if things get really drastic, if there are major food shortages, energy shortages, more supply chain disruptions to where you can't get a lot of what you're used to getting, and then to add to that possibly another pandemic and even more extreme restrictions being imposed than in the last one, you get people so frustrated that one of two things would happen. They either completely rebel frankly, Jim, if that happens, in my opinion, our foreign adversaries would probably attack us from the outside. They would attack us at our weakest moment. That would be our weakest moment. So then on the other hand, you have the possibility that people get so frustrated they just finally capitulate and give in to the, to the New World Order. So that neither option is good. Really what we need is a massive, unprecedented repentance and turning back to God and looking to God to intervene on our behalf.
Some look at the major players who appear to be destroying our nation, and people wonder how inept can they be, but you indicate that those who are driving this one world agenda are not
Let's go.
evil.
Good shit. I didn't realize you had that flag.
Exactly. I mean, you have to conclude that, right? I mean, I saw a survey, probably it's been at least 5 years ago now, maybe closer to 10 years. It's interesting, and I wish I would have written down the numbers right then, but it went something like this. At that time, people with a high school degree and nothing more, a minority of them embraced the idea of same-sex marriage. I'm just using one moral issue as an example. Those with a college degree, it was close to half. Those with a master's degree, it was like 60+%. Those with a doctorate degree, it was, if I remember right, close to 80%. And so what I came away with looking at that example is that the more people have been exposed to higher education, the more liberal they become, generally speaking, and the more they move away from God and taking the Bible anywhere close to literally. And I believe that's what we're facing here. A lot of these people are intellectuals from the Northeast and from California. They think those of us who are Christians who actually believe the Bible are a bunch of idiots, and they've rejected the God of the Bible. They believe they're moving the world in a direction that, in their opinion, is going to be sustainable. But, oh, by the way, we have to get rid of a big part of the world's population to make it sustainable. And the only way you can do that really is either through increasing wars, pandemics, or starvation. I mean, those are anything else would fall under those three categories. And so only an evil mind would come up with that. You can't believe that they're stupid and making these kinds of decisions, taking us in this direction when they articulate from the universities down the thinking behind it. In other words, they understand, I think, to a large extent what the ramifications are, at least in this world, but they reject the spiritual side of things. So if you take on an occultic or humanistic worldview, you can justify and rationalize just about anything. The end justifies the means, and that's what we're looking at here.
So this biblical worldview or a Christian worldview, it's just not part of this narrative, is it, going forward?
It is not part of this narrative. The way is too narrow for them. Yeah. They'll support interfaithism, the idea that all religions are pathways to God, and nominal Christians, people who call themselves Christians, but actually go along with interfaithism, which means you're really not a Christian at all, because you either believe what Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes unto the Father except through me, or you reject it. What Jesus did was completely unique. He died on the cross, rose again, and claimed to pay the penalty for man's sins. No other religion does that. So the teachings of the Bible regarding Christ, who he was, what he did, are completely opposed to the other world religions that have other pathways to immortality. And really all of this, you can take it all the way back to the beginning. God forbid man from eating of the forbidden fruit. And Satan came along and did what through the serpent? Said, eat of this fruit, and you shall be as gods, and you shall never die. Well, that's the whole foundation, really, of pantheism in the Eastern religions. They teach that we can become gods, ultimately, and we never die. We just go through reincarnations, and eventually we become so highly evolved that we become a spiritual master ourselves, a spirit being that helps guide the affairs of mankind. That's what Eastern mysticism teaches. That's what the core beliefs of the New Age movement teach. And so, it completely runs contrary to the teachings of the Bible that teach there's a finality, there's a judgment. We're all going to stand before God, and to pass through that judgment and have eternal life in
versus Jackson, women's health organization decision that came down from the Supreme Court June 24th. But here's what you said. You indicated that this decision could send the abortion issue back to the states. If so, expect thousands of radical liberals to take to the streets. Gary, that's exactly what we've been seeing since that leak came out, and even more so since the June 24th decision.
Exactly. And yeah, I wrote this about 10 days before the decision. It went in the mail a day or two before. Some people are just getting this today, the hard copies around the country. And we're seeing this unfold, on television. I mean, in some unexpected places. And because they didn't know exactly when the ruling was going to come out, it threw them a little bit for a loop. And I think it was smart by the justices not to say, okay, on this day we're going to make this announcement. So I expect over the next week or so we'll see some of the rioting pick up. And I wrote in the article, I said some of these same people who march for animal rights, protection of the environment, and social justice will fight for the so-called right to kill defenseless human beings.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, is there ever interbreeding between species?
Indeed there is, Chris. To illustrate this, let's talk about dogs. We know that in domestic dogs there are many different breeds, and some of them are very different, from Great Danes to Chihuahuas, but all of them are interfertile. They're all part of the same species. The Bible tells us that God created the various kinds, and the dog kind, no doubt, included the domestic dogs, but it evidently also included the wolf and the fox and the coyote, because all of them can interbreed. Now I find that even jackals have been interbred with domestic dogs. Jackals have a very acute sense of smell, and so breeding them with huskies produced a new dog, which are good sniffer dogs for use in airports. Once again, Chris, we see that the biblical creation story is the one that makes sense, and that's the Back to Genesis truth.
This is Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in. Gary Kai is our guest here today in the broadcast, and we thank you for tuning in to the VCY American Network. Still working through some little glitches here on Crosstalk, but bring some critical information coming your way here today from Crosstalk and the VCY American Network. Brace yourselves. Gary Kai is our guest, and Gary, we're going to unfold during this segment here some of the things we have to brace ourselves for that you're writing about. I mean, matter of fact, you bring several issues to the forefront. And one of those issues is entitled The Coming Shortages. Now, you're not only commenting on food, but even energy shortages, and you would comment on this issue of the coming shortages.
Yeah, I decided in this article to hit energy and food big because I think those are going to be the areas of the most shortages. Interesting, the Biden administration has been saying, hey, prepare there may be power outages this summer.
Fuck Joe Biden.
They haven't told us why, though.
Fuck Joe Biden.
The administration's policies
Fuck Joe.
have forced the closure of more coal-fired power plants and some nuclear plants. So far, in 2022, we're almost at the halfway mark. During the first 6 months of this year, more power plants have closed in this country than in all of the time between 2015 and 2020 combined. So, I mean, they have really been speeding this up.
Wow.
I mean, if you think about it, over a 5-year period, fewer plants closed than in the last 6 months alone. And in the meantime, they're encouraging people to buy electric cars. And so that's just adding to the problem, because the electricity just isn't there for that. And it just doesn't make any sense unless it's intentional. I mean, you can't tell me these people are this dumb, this stupid, that they don't realize what they're bringing about here. There's going to be a huge energy shortage. Gasoline right now is leveled off. In most places, it's around $5. We traveled this weekend, and it was anywhere from $4.74 to around $5.30 a gallon. But if you live on the coast, it's already $7 and even $8 in some places. And think it's going to go way down anytime soon. They're just putting little Band-Aids on here and there, that give a little bit of relief for a couple of weeks, and then it goes right back up. And then there's the whole food thing. You can live without a lot of things, but without food, things get real difficult real fast. In February, right before the Ukraine war broke out, just a couple weeks before, a friend of mine who owns a large farm and is also politically well-connected and informed specifically called me to give me heads up. And he said, Gary, they're going to weaponize food. Get ready. They're going to weaponize food. And then he went on to share a couple of things, because I asked him, well, what do you mean? Give me an example of some of what's happening. And he shared this following story, and I share this in my article. He said a friend of his from church, who also owned a large farm, died unexpectedly of a heart attack, and then a few weeks after he died, two men showed up at his widow's door. After offering their condolences, they asked her how much money she would like for her farm, assuming that she wanted to sell it now, so that, now that she was a widow and probably wouldn't want to run such a big operation by herself. So she quickly responded. She said she had no interest in selling. The men asked, but if you were to sell, what would you want for the farm? In other words, just pretend. And so after some time, she reluctantly gave them an amount, and these men then promptly offered her way more than that. They actually bid up the price just to kind of seal the deal, and make it almost impossible for her to turn it down. And my friend went on to tell me that this type of land grab by huge corporate conglomerates is taking place throughout North America, not just the United States, but Canada as well. And as it turned out, in this instance, the two men worked for a company owned by China. So the fact is, more and more of America's farms are owned or controlled by Chinese-front organizations, as are many of our food processing plants, especially in the area of meat production. A huge problem. You don't want China, of all countries, to own or even strongly influence our food industry. But we've allowed this to take place over the last 15 to 20 years, and now we're in a real predicament. So walk through this with me for a moment. Think through this. If China is under contract to have a lot of our grains exported to them, then in theory, you could have more than enough food grown in this country, but a lot of it is going to be shipped under obligation to China and other places overseas. That's part of the problem. But even a bigger problem is that those who are doing the shipping and who are growing the food are actually Chinese-owned right from the get-go in our country. Well, and then you add to that the war in Ukraine. You've got a lot of Ukrainian farmers that have not been able to plant their crops this spring because of the war. But not only that, they've got massive amounts of grain sitting in their ports, but Russia's not allowing it to go out. And in addition to that, Russia is also a large producer of grains. In some cases, with some countries, they're not shipping anymore to them either because of the being on opposite sides of the war with Ukraine. And so there's that. And then it gets worse, unfortunately. Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus together supply over 30% of the resources used globally to make fertilizer. So I think we're not going to feel the full brunt of that yet this year, because I think there's enough stockpile of fertilizer perhaps, but we're really going to feel that 2023 as this war drags on, because with a much diminished amount of fertilizer internationally, you're going to have less crops coming out of the ground, maybe 5 or 10% or something like that, just from that alone. And then I can keep going. The biggest one is yet to come. Do you want me to go for it, Jim?
Well, it's something called DEF fluid, and I'd like you to tell us, what is this DEF fluid?
Yeah, I just found out about this as well recently, and this is one that hasn't been discussed yet in the media at all, to the best of my knowledge. DEF fluid stands for diesel exhaust fluid, and every diesel truck that's been built since 2010 is required to use it. It's a product made of 67% urea fertilizer and 33% distilled water. So, of course, if there's a fertilizer shortage in the world, it's going to affect and directly impact the production of DEF fluid. Russia, of course, is the largest exporter of urea by a wide margin. Egypt and China are tied for third, and both Russia and China have decided to no longer export urea. So I don't need to tell you how much pressure that puts on the global market regarding diesel exhaust fluid. So to drive it home to this country, first of all, we're the third largest importer in the world of diesel exhaust fluid, and Flying J Truck Stops is the largest service provider for truckers of diesel exhaust fluid. Flying J provides about 30% of all DEF consumed in the United States, so keep that in mind. It's close to a third. Flying J gets 70% of their DEF fluid from shipments via Union Pacific Railroad. So Union Pacific has single-user access to the fertilizer plants that urea DEF fluid comes from. And so they have kind of a lock. Union Pacific has told Flying J to reduce their shipments by a whopping 50%. And if they do not comply, then they will be completely embargoed. And so what this means is that DEF fluid going through Flying J, being supplied to truckers, is going to be cut way down. In fact, this is taking place right now. As soon as Flying J stockpiles run out, there's going to be a lot less DEF fluid for truckers. And that's just with Flying J. I don't know how the other truck stops are going to be influenced by this. I imagine they're going to be facing a similar situation. But just through Flying J, I figured out that at a minimal, there's going to be 10% less DEF fluid available nationally, if nothing else beyond what I just shared with you. And so you already have supply chain issues. So now picture at least 10, if not 15% or more, of trucks not being able to drive because of a lack of this fluid. This is going to be chaotic, possibly yet by later this summer. I think it's going to take a while to unfold, but later this year we're going to begin to feel this. To give you an idea of who controls this and who's able to make some of these decisions regarding the lack of fertilizer and urea coming into the country and then deciding what to do as a result of this, okay, BlackRock is the majority shareholder of Union Pacific Railroad, which is the main shipper of this substance. Also, America's biggest fertilizer producer is CF Industries, because we do make about a third of our supply here in the country, but the main producer is CF Industries. Their largest shareholder is BlackRock. So BlackRock controls the fertilizer industry in the U.S. Union Pacific has exclusive rights to distribution points of this fertilizer. They have, to a large extent, are controlled by BlackRock. And so that poses a problem, because BlackRock has become one of the major globalist movers and shakers. The chairman of the BlackRock Investment Institute is Tom Donilon, who was President Obama's former national security advisor.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave, Gary. I mean, that's what it sounds like. This you're unfolding, describing is like this tangled web.
It is. And just to go one step further yet, Tom Donilon's brother, Mike Donilon, is a senior advisor to Joe Biden. And Tom Donilon's wife, Catherine Russell, is the White House personnel director.
Right.
Tom Donilon's daughter now works on the White House National Security Council. So this is direct BlackRock influence right into the White House at the highest level, and they're also tied in.
You know what? Go get your news from this monetized channel, that monetized channel, your favorite fucking little face on the screen who loves to jerk off on their own goddamn attention and make money off of yours, right? Jim Bob's Arcade, if you want the truth, if you want real fucking news, if you want a true freedom forum, alright, stop fucking around on YouTube. You can call into Crosstalk. There's an app. There's a phone number. It's a call-in radio station. It's live. You can interact directly with them. Guess what? It's free. No one's going to make money off of your attention. No one is going to monetize off your comments. Why do you think they love these bastards that are fucking lifetime guardians of the gate, fucking, politically professionalized moderators, right? Look, you want news? You want real news? VCY America. All other news is fake news, y'all. It's fake news.